probably the very last lecture, I showed you how to create buttons, and I showed you how to create those buttons through the button palette right here. If you don't see all this buttons and page transition, hyperlinks, bookmarks, make sure you go under workspace, interactive PDF. So I showed you how you can create a button with this interface. So what I did is I created a shape. Let me create really quickly, just recap and prove to you why that is important to do it in alternative ways sometimes. So there we are. So I created a shape, and you can see the bounding box is just a regular bounding box, but in the minute in which I go in here and I say buttons, it turns to a dashed actually bounding box. Let me actually zoom a little bit so you see it better. Do you see that down there, right here? And here you can say I want a rollover state, and maybe the rollover state is just simply 50% opacity change. I have a normal state, that means the state in which I don't touch the button. This is when I roll over the button. I'm going to call it, for example, next, enter, and in here I'm going to say go to next page. Remember that everything up here is valid for every export, no matter if it's EPUB, interactive PDF, or other ways. This one is only for when you do animation and EPUB for books, and this is only for PDF. So I generally stay up here as much as I can, just because that way if I want to convert it to something else, I can, right? It's easy to do because these actions are going to be valid for everything. So I type go to next page. Now if I want this button in every page, I'm going to Command X. So I'm going to cut it out. Sorry, Command X. Oops. Sorry, Command X once again. And I'm going to go in the parent page, right? I'm going to go under pages. It should be here somewhere. Page transition. Right here, pages. And for example, if I have a parent A that is assigned to, let's talk about just page A and the parent assigned to page A1 and 2 have the same parent. So I'm going to go in the parent and I'm going to say edit, paste, and place. So I created the button and I placed it inside the A, and the reason why is because that way I have it in all the pages where A is assigned. So when I switch to, for example, 1, there is that button. If I switch to 2, there is the button. If I assign A to 3, there is the button, and etc., etc., right? So now I have my button, and it's supposed to take me to the next page. And if I actually, I'm in page 1, if I preview it by going into the button interface and clicking on this little icon, that has that little play button, looks like a little screen with a play button. I'm going to say multi-page, hit the play, and when I click, it takes me to the next page. And then it takes me to the next page. And then it takes me to the next page. Perfect, right? You would think it's awesome. I'm going to go and say File. Actually, first I'm going to save it. Always save. And then File, Export. And I'm going to make it into an interactive PDF. I'm going to call it text test 3. Sure, it's going to tell me if you want to replace it. Make sure it says when you export it interactive, not PDF for print. That would be a problem. And where is test 3 right now? Let me find it. There it is, right here. So when I double click, it should open with Acrobat Reader. If it opens with Preview, all the interactivity won't work anyway. But if I go in here and I try to click on this button, you see it doesn't work, right? I'm there really trying to click and it doesn't work. I'm using InDesign 2022. So I did a bunch of searches on InDesign 2022 and it said that it was buggy. They basically, oftentimes it doesn't work. And what they recommended instead is to create the buttons through hyperlinks. That is what I'm going to show you right now. So what it's basically telling you to do, so instead use a simple text box, put some text in it, and then assign a hyperlink that takes you to the next page. How do you do that? I'm going to actually delete this one, go in the master, or I keep calling it master because for 20 years it was called master. I apologize, now it's parent. I'm going to go in the parent. Now remember, in the parent you have to put the page numbering because the page number is a requirement in the assignment, and that's where you need to put the page number is in the parent. But let's go in page 1 right now and talk about links, because that's what we've been talking about. So I created a text box right here, and I typed the word next, and I made it into a hyperlink. How do I do that? I'm going to go in the hyperlink palette and show you. First of all, let me delete everything that I made already earlier. These are all, in fact, let me actually show you. Before I delete it, let me say Command S and export it, and I show you that these ones indeed work. I'm going to call it this time simply test, interactive, save, replace. Okay, so now I'm going to double click on test and show you that if I go and type on next, it goes to next. If I go to next again, it goes to it. And I now ran out because I didn't do it for too many pages. And previous takes me to previous and takes me to previous, right? So my point is that if you do it this other way, it is pretty much bulletproof. It has limitation though, right? You cannot do an overstate, for example. But you know, if you wanted to view this document on an iPad or an iPhone or on any mobile device, the hyperlinks works for sure. The other one doesn't. Even, you know, I assure you it doesn't on computers. But if you created those buttons through prior versions of InDesign, oftentimes they actually works. But then they don't work when you export it to be let me actually delete all these. I want to show you how to. They don't work for a mobile when you're doing all the buttons through this button palette. So let me remove all these and show you how to create them. Create even just a few at this point. So let me go back to page 1, and I'm going to go with my text box, click and drag, and type next. Select it, give in whatever font you like. Let me try Futura. That is a pretty nice font. Give it the color you want. Like a nice, intense, deep blue. And now that you have that, you need to go in the hyperlink palette and click on this plus sign. The default is URL. You need to switch to page and say go to page 2. And if you use the strong option, it makes the font a little bit thicker. And if you use this invisible rectangle, what it means is when you go to click, if you did not have the invisible rectangle, when you click in between the two letters where it's blank, it will not allow you to click. The invisible rectangle means it puts something behind your letters so that is all considered a clickable element. So I'm going to say OK. And then, let me put it down here. And then I'm going to copy it and go to the next page. So the problem with this button is instead of having it in the parent, in which you do it only once, you have to do it in every page. That's the only, but generally, you copy and paste in place. Remember, when you place in place, though, you need to double click and say that you want to go to the next page, to page 3. Okay, otherwise, obviously, it doesn't work. And then you keep, you know, going in here, edit, paste in place, and double click and say you want to go on page 4, and etc., etc. Obviously, you do that. You can do the same thing with the previous. You create a text box, and this time you're going, you know, to the prior page. But let's export this one so that you see that these next indeed work. Export. Again, remember when you preview, you have to be an Acrobat reader. If you are in preview, it doesn't work. So now I'm going to go in here and click, go to the next, click, go to the next, click, go to the next. As you can see, it works like a charm. A few more things in InDesign that to me are important to tell you. You see how in InDesign right now, we see it with all these boxes, what we call the frames. If you want to see how it's actually going to be when you're publishing it, you want to hit W. Oops, sorry, I need to activate InDesign. I apologize. I think I was still in Acrobat. So if you hit W, you can see now that is as if, you know, there's no frames visible because it's when you finally, you know, did the export. That's how it looks. It's kind of the similar thing in Illustrator when you view things in outline versus preview preview mode, right? This is the preview mode. When you hit W again, you go back to the what we call in InDesign the working mode. Another thing you should know is sometimes when you bring in images, they seem to be really grainy. So what you want to do is actually the way InDesign preview things, it shows you kind of a low quality preview, simply because InDesign is meant to be handling a lot of files, right? You can really put like a 500 pages book with thousands of files in terms of images in there. And if all those images were displayed at high quality, it would be really quite difficult. So what InDesign shows you is what we call typical display. You can see kind of like a little bit pixelated. So if you were to, want to see it better, what you want to do is select that image, control click on it, and go in display performance and choose high quality display. And you'll see that now it's not pixelated anymore. I don't know if you could see on through Zoom, but the quality got a lot better. So remember that that is an option. Remember that in InDesign, as soon as you're done working for that day, you want to always go in there and say File, Package. Make sure, sorry, I'm stopping because I want to make sure it says no error down here. If I had any error, make sure you go in here and say Pre-Flight Panel, and it will list the errors and even link the pages where the error are, and all you have to do is click on that page and find out. But if you have no error, then you can file package it. That is kind of sweet because it means you're creating a little folder. And what I suggest people to do is always call it with A, B, C, D. So for example, you call it Dolphins folder _ A. And you put it on the desktop, right? And you say package. And remember, it packages, I leave it to the default, but all the fonts, all the images, and even if there are some graphics that needs to be updated, it updates it for you. And what and obviously, sorry, the disclaimer that I said okay to was to copy all the fonts in there, because InDesign wants obviously kind of say if you copy the fonts and then you give them to someone, even though you paid for it and that someone should pay, we're not responsible. It's kind of like a protecting themselves. As you can see, there's always your InDesign file. There's a document fonts, and there are the links in there. So after you package it and you're done that day, let's say the following day you want to work on it some more, you open it from this folder, work and work and work, and then when you're done, you package it again, and this time you call it _B. So by the end of your work, you'll have a series of folders, but you always know everything is packaged and all your links are not, there's no broken links. By the way, it generally tells you if there are broken links, as I said down here, but here's where you find all your links in the links palette, and those links can be updated. You can choose, so if you want to edit this image, for example, and remove one of the two dolphins, you can select it here and then choose edit with and choose Photoshop. You change it in Photoshop. As soon as you hit save, it's going to be updated in here. So that's pretty sweet. So what else did I need to tell you in InDesign? Did I forget anything? You can decide how many parent pages you want. You might decide that your entire project needs just one parent page with the page number, and that's it. If you use the hyperlinks like this, you don't even put the buttons in the parent, right? You will have the buttons in each individual page. And that's kind of what you need to know for this project. Just have in the what is due on Thursday, have all your pages, all the different sections, right? The cover, the title, table of contents, sorry, the cover has the title, the table of content, and then you have like projects, and then you have, whatever else you want to include in there that is listed on the requirement. So that's kind of all I think is important for you to know, is this idea that if the buttons you create through this palette do not work, you always have the option to do the hyperlinks. That is what I was showing you right here. Thank you, guys.